all can hear us okay before I get started. Everybody good? All right, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Attorney General Josh Call. I am joined today by DA Jason Sanders, the Rock County DA, Megan Newport, who's Deputy District Attorney in Milwaukee County, as well as Jen Naugle, who's the Deputy Administrator at the Wisconsin State Crime Labs. We just completed a tour of the crime lab here in Milwaukee, as well as being joined by some legislators and some legislative staff. And what we're doing today is opening up the labs so that partners who we work with in the criminal justice system, as well as legislators who play a critical role in ensuring we've got the resources we need for the lab system, are able to see what's happening. Now, as you may know, we are in the midst of a transition process here at the lab. There's a new facility being built, which will open up in about a year. So we think this is likely the last tour we'll be conducting at this particular location. But the science that's being conducted will be the same or largely the same at the new labs. So we had a chance today to hear from folks in a few different disciplines within the state crime labs. We heard from our crime scene response folks who respond to some of the most complex crime scenes or scenes involving significant critical incidents around the state. We also spoke about some of the science being done in chemistry, toxicology, DNA, and the firearms unit. And one thing that I wanted to stress, and we've asked some of our partners here to talk about, is the critical function that the crime labs play in the justice system. There are a lot of things that go into making a criminal investigation and prosecution successful and effective at protecting our safety. That includes the work that's done by law enforcement officers to investigate crimes. It includes work done by the labs to analyze evidence. And it includes work done by prosecutors to hold those who have been charged with crimes accountable through the justice process. So by opening up our doors, we want to emphasize how we are transparent in the work that we do. Our lab is committed to being open and objective in the work that it does. But also how critical it is to public safety. Now in Wisconsin, resourcing those labs adequately is really important. The technology that our analysts work on continues to evolve. One of the things we talked about on the tour that I was on today was the upgrade in DNA analysis to what's called probabilistic genotyping, which allows us to get matches in more DNA cases. That's great for solving crimes, but it also means that additional time is spent on individual cases where DNA is analyzed. Of course, for those of you who are familiar with primetime TV, you know that shows like CSI and other similar shows have also raised awareness about forensic science. And while what we do doesn't always exactly look like what's on CSI, there is an interest from juries and from those involved in court cases in having forensic science as part of the presentation of evidence. So there is significant demand for the work that's done. In the last state budget, we asked for 16 additional positions for the crime labs. Unfortunately, we only received 3 positions in that budget. So in this budget, we are again asking for a significant investment to be made. We've asked for 19 positions for the labs. A little bit over half of those positions would go towards DNA testing. But having those kinds of positions helps ensure that we are able to remain on the cutting edge in the analysis that we do, and that we have the resources to ensure that cases are tested effectively and efficiently. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to DA Sanders, who can talk a little bit more about the lab.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jason Sanders. I'm the District Attorney of Rock County. Good news and bad news. I'm a good prosecutor and a terrible politician. And the reason for that is I have this nasty habit of just telling you the plain truth. So here's the plain truth. Every single case that involves DNA evidence, firearm analysis, fingerprints, shoe prints, a litany of other things that I'm failing to mention right now and maybe hurting the feelings of some good person I just met. Any case that involves that important evidence cannot go forward, will not be resolved until the crime lab has had the chance to do its job. If it's a plea, no defense attorney is going to plead until They know that the state has DNA evidence. If it's a trial, well, somebody needs to not only produce that evidence, but then come testify at that trial, which means, of course, while they're testifying, they're not testing. Just think about that for a second. I know most of y'all are looking at a camera, but every case of DNA, every case with firearms, that's another way of saying every serious case in 72 counties, every homicide, every attempt homicide, every sexual assault, all of them come through here, and we don't get to finish doing our jobs to get justice for victims until they've had a chance to do their job here. So when we have cases that, I'm just gonna be honest, languish, right? The homicide trial doesn't start until 2.5 years after the homicide happened. When we have victims sitting in district attorneys' offices, frustrated and honestly, sometimes crying and literally holding the hand of a good person who chose to spend his or her life working as a victim witness professional. It's hard to give them the polite answer, right? Because we know the truth. We know a lot of this holdup is because we have failed to make as much of an investment in our crime labs as we need to. And I want to be clear, I have always found nothing but the highest level of professionalism and expertise from the people in this building. The people in this building are not the problem. The problem is the number of people who aren't in this building. And then the lab says we need 16 analysts, and then we as a state give them 3. And then we all sit back and wonder, hey, why are these cases taking so long? Why haven't we gotten this to a jury trial faster? As if there were any other outcome that could have possibly happened. I'm probably gonna screw some things up and get myself uninvited because I tend to just speak true. But anybody hearing my voice, I'm begging you to learn as much as you can about how critical the crime lab is to justice and public safety in the state of Wisconsin. How impossible it is to do our jobs for anybody involved, from the original officer responding on the scene to a judge passing a sentence, to do their jobs without this place. And I'm really grateful, sincerely, that we're walking around today with some members of our legislature. Because I think a big part of what's a problem in America today is this difficulty communicating and fully understanding. I think that's true about just about everything, but it seems extra true if you are an elected official who has 1,000 things to think about and thousands of people to be responsible for. So them taking the time to come down here, to see this with their own eyes, to hear it, first of all, they should be applauded, and second of all, I'm begging them to take that back with them. Because if they say they need 19, it's because they need 19. And if we give them a number that's a lot less than 19, then 2 years from now, if I'm standing at a podium like this, or more likely, if they invite somebody more delicate to stand at a podium like this, we're all gonna have some questions about, well, why are these cases taking so long? And nobody's gonna wanna say out loud what I'm gonna tell you out loud right now. The answer is gonna be because they told us how many people they needed, and we said no. Thank you to everybody for coming, and thank you for having us.
So with the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office, we are in contact, our prosecutors are in contact with members of the State Crime Lab on a daily basis. Our cases from Milwaukee County inundate the lab with hundreds to thousands of pieces of evidence on a yearly basis, and they're relating to homicides, sexual assaults, shootings, armed robberies, other firearms offenses, drug cases, and it's certainly not uncommon to see one case with multiple disciplines of evidence coming into the lab. on a single case. And I would mirror what Attorney General Call said, is that it feels like there are different demands on forensic evidence than there were a decade ago or 2 decades ago. And I think that there's a general expectation from the public, and whether that's accurate from seeing things on TV or not, there are different demands, and jurors and members of the public expect different types of evidence. And DNA is a good example of that. Our cases are directly impacted by the work done at the lab. And the justice system, particularly in Milwaukee County, where we had a large backlog due to the COVID-19 pandemic, moving cases through the justice system, there are delays that occur because of understaffing in all departments, but at the lab as well. I think there was some recent retirements within the controlled substance unit about a year ago, recently, and there were notable delays because they didn't have analysts that were trained to take the place of the senior analysts that were retiring. So when there's an ask for more resources, it's not just at the lab that you have to think, it's how that impacts the entire criminal justice system and the way cases are moving through that justice system in a fair way, in a just way for all of the parties involved. So it's crucial to have the resources available to make sure that the lab is staffed appropriately and that it's staffed with highly skilled and highly educated analysts that are able to do their work, but also come into court and testify and articulate the science part of their jobs so that the attorneys, the judge, and jurors can understand what their work entails. So to that end, the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office has coupled on a couple different occasions with members from the crime lab to engage in trainings to provide analysts the ability to come in and train with us to testify, to articulate what their findings are, because we all want them to be able to articulate what their findings are. But we can only do that if they're staffed appropriately and staffed with the skilled analysts that they are asking for. Thank you.
Well, first let me just say thank you to everybody who's joined us up here today. Thank you to everybody who joined us on the tour, and thank you in particular to our team at the labs, not only for helping organize this, but for all the work that you do day in and day out. So with that, I'm happy to open up to questions. I would ask we start with any on-topic questions, and I can take off-topic if there are any afterwards, but I'll let these folks step down before we get there.
How many analysts are currently working in the lab here in Milwaukee, and then how many statewide?
The Milwaukee numbers?
We have about 64 folks working.
64 in the Milwaukee lab, and total,
192
that's total staff,
total
right?
for the whole entire, yeah.
And I think that's not just analysts, it's also other staff.
Yeah.
But we can get you the exact details.
Great. And can you explain some of the current timing? So when, for example, there's a piece of evidence that's submitted, about what's the average time to isolate that DNA from the submitted?
It varies a lot by discipline. So there are certain areas where the turnaround times are faster than others. That has to do with a variety of things, but even within toxicology, for example, if they're doing blood alcohol testing, that takes a certain amount of time. I'm sorry, alcohol testing, BAC testing, but it takes longer if they're also testing for controlled substances. But what we can do is get you our latest crime lab annual report, which has average turnaround times and median times for all the different disciplines. I can get you an exact number. I don't have that on me, but what I will say is, at a time when we've got a state surplus of over $4 billion, this is an ask that is certainly affordable. Of course, as the budget process moves forward, we'll have those discussions with folks, but making sure that our justice system moves along quickly is in the interest of victims of crime. It's also in the interest of defendants to make sure their trials are heard quickly. So this is something that serves the entire justice system.
Generally speaking, how is evidence prioritized when it comes into the lab, and how do deadlines like jury trials affect the work that's going on here?
There are a few things that we do to prioritize, and please add anything you'd like to. There are certain cases where there is a significant public safety risk, and when that's the case, those cases go to the top of the list. So for example, if there's an unsolved homicide case or an unsolved sexual assault case, those cases will be prioritized and get handled the fastest. A lot of the work that we do is confirmatory, and what I mean by that is there's a suspect identified, or in the case of controlled substances, there's a suspected type of drug it is. So those cases get handled in the regular course. And then if there's a jury trial deadline that has to be met, that then gets moved up the list as well. And so when we're talking about thousands of pieces of evidence and multiple different types of testing that needs to be done, just managing that is itself a complex process. But our goal is to do as much as we can to prioritize the cases where they have to be prioritized for public safety while not slowing down the process of testing all the other cases as well. Anything you'd add to that?
That's perfect.
Great.
So when it comes to resources that you're asking for, you mentioned 19 positions. Is staffing the number one issue, or is it technology, updated technology that's also needed?
Yeah, it's a number of things that impact turnaround time. Right now, while there are, of course, we're always sort of following evolutions in technology, and I'll mention in a minute a couple places we've upgraded. Our biggest focus right now is on staffing. I think probably our crime lab team would agree that's our biggest need right now. But recently, in the last few years, for instance, the DNA methodology we use was shifted to what's called probabilistic genotyping. That allows us to get DNA matches in more cases, but it means more data is tested. Likewise, with toxicology, we've got new instrumentation that allows us to identify drugs at a smaller quantity, which is really important when you're trying to identify dangerous drugs like fentanyl. We don't want to miss it, but it also means more data and more time needed for analysis. In the the crime scene response briefing we had today, they talked about some of the technology they use to capture what happened at a scene. But again, there's a lot of complexity to that. So as these areas have science evolve and there become different technologies, that also leads to more need for people to do that work.
After having legislators walk and take a tour, what was the interest level that came out afterwards when it comes to getting the resources?
Yeah, well, certainly the legislators who were here, I know, were really interested in what they were seeing, and were very engaged. I will say we've tried to do tours like this a few different times, and we've always had a lot of interest and engagement from legislators, which has been great. And one of the reasons that I think it's so important for folks to come see this is, if you watch the news, there's obviously a lot of commentary about folks working in the federal government right now and their ongoing efforts there, and I'm not going to weigh in on that at this moment. But what I will say is, if you look around the lab, what you will see is hardworking, dedicated staff who have a lot of expertise and do a lot of important work to help keep our communities safe. And it's the kind of investment that I hope legislators, regardless of party, can get behind.
So an extra $15 million was just recently added to the new building that's going to be built next year. Is DNA testing going to be a focus on that new equipment being added in?
So at the new labs, which we hope to move into in about a year, there are going to be a few ways that's going to help out what we do. One is that will allow us to have sufficient space for people to do their job and not be cramped. We think that will help improve efficiency. With respect to our firearms analysis, there's a technological upgrade we'll be able to make with that additional space. But I think the biggest thing is, in the longer term, that space will allow the labs in the years ahead to be able to have the space that they need to adopt new technologies. When this lab was first opened, it was in the 1980s, is that right?
1984 we moved.
1984, the number of lab staff, the demands for staff, the scientific analysis that was being done was very different. I should be careful to ask our crime lab team, but was that before DNA analysis even began?
We did not have DNA.
Yeah, so just to give you a sense, when this lab was open, DNA analysis wasn't being conducted. So to move into a facility that will allow the lab to adopt cutting-edge technology as it's being developed is going to help prepare us for the future as well as addressing current needs.
And is the new building going to be built with in mind
So there are 3 labs in Wisconsin. The Milwaukee lab is one of the 3. We are, tell me if I'm wrong, but we're confident that we have space to house those additional number of staff. Obviously, that's something we would continue analyzing as we move forward, but the new facility would allow us to have folks move in. Great. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.